Good evening. Wow, what a turnout tonight. I am so happy to see all of you. Thank you for coming out to Conesville for tonight's program. But before we get started with that, I just want to give you a quick overview of some of the things we have up and coming in Conesville. This Friday, we have the Catskill Mountain String Band coming at 6:30 p.m. right here. And this is sponsored with a CREATE grant made possible with funds from the statewide community grants program. So we are very excited to have received that grant and to be able to provide some music for our community. So that is this Friday at 6:30. And there are flyers in the entryway if you want to take any to distribute or to keep for yourself. Sorry, we do have an EMS call, so that might go off a few times in the next few minutes. On September 13th, it's Conesville's annual Touch-a-Truck Day with the fire department. We will start over here at 10:30 a.m. with a lecture by Ted Short, the Schoharie County historian. He will be talking about inns, taverns, and hotels of Schoharie County, and that begins at 10:30 a.m. Touch-a-Truck happens from 12 to 4 across the street, and there's lots of events for families. There's some vendors, different trucks and apparatus on display from the area. But that evening at 7 p.m., we have our new annual tradition of a square dance with the Tremper Skill Boys. So if you're interested in square dancing, great event. Even if you don't dance yourself, it's fun to watch and just get together with the community. And all ages are welcomed. We had some youngsters, some teens last year there, and it was a great event. On September 15th, which is a Monday, our programs are typically held the third Monday of every month. Debbie Hill and a group of us will be presenting on the oral history project that we've been running for the past year and a half so far. And we will hopefully have some of the people that we've had interviewed here to tell their stories. We'll show clips of the edited versions of the interviews, and we'll talk about the experience. So there's 10 interviews that we've done so far. They're all in the flyer. If you're interested, you might recognize some of the faces. And that project is ongoing. So if you are from Conesville or you have connections to Conesville, and if you are interested in sharing some of your stories, we would love to have a conversation with you. And then on September 20th and 21st across the street, Amy Silberkley is hosting her printmaking workshop. We encourage you to consider registering for that. The registration information is on the flyer. That also is courtesy of the CREATE grant program. And she offered a wonderful workshop last year that so many people popped in and enjoyed creating the prints. It's expanded for this year. So thank you for that, Amy. And then in October, a little further away, I will be doing a presentation on World War I in Conesville and the vicinity based on the research that I have done so far. So with all of that being said, our program tonight is led by Lee Hudson. Lee Hudson comes to us from the Gilboa Historical Society and the Gilboa Museum. Lee Hudson is a very intelligent woman with a lot of knowledge about the subject she's about to present on, which is the Fox newsreel in Gilboa in 1925 and the building of the Schoharie Reservoir. So I am very excited to have you here tonight, and I look forward to your presentation myself. After Lee is done with her presentation, we'll take a break. There's refreshments over there, and anyone who would like to stay for a Historical Society business meeting is welcome. Thank you so much, and welcome to Lee.
Thank you very much, Kim. We've all been watching this Conesville group, very carefully, and it's very impressive how this organization has grown immeasurably over just even the last couple of years. So I'm delighted to be asked here. Kim asked me to come to talk a little bit about this newsreel that we created in Gilboa based on some footage, some silent news footage that we learned about and then later licensed to be able to edit and circulate like we're doing now. We have it showing in the Gilboa Museum, and she was interested in me bringing it here to share it here in Conesville, but also talking initially about the backstory to this newsreel. How did we hear about it? How do we get it? What did we do? Why did we make this silent newsreel from it? And so this evening, what I'd like to do is to lay out a little bit of this backstory for you, then show you the newsreel, and then we could talk as a group about what was going on in Gilboa when these news people were there taking this footage, and that would be in 1923 and 1925. So as a rear view mirror here, I put up this slide of this map, which was a map from 1905 after the legislature told the Bureau of Water Supply to come together, created it, and said, solve the water crisis that is developing rapidly and exists in New York City. So in 1905, this was the plan of the Bureau of Water Supply. They, if this screen were a little bigger, you would be able to see that reservoir up here at the top says Prattsville Reservoir. That was the plan. The plan was Prattsville. It wasn't Gilboa at all. But the engineers discovered that they would double their water supply almost with some more tributaries coming in if they went a little further north. And so it is, Prattsville didn't escape completely. They lost about 21 parcels and several hundred acres of property. They also lost one of the finest farms in the Tri-County area, the Huggins farm, the Maple Grove farm. So there were losses that everyone experienced. In Roxbury, here in Conesville as well, people lost property and homes. And of course, the people that were most severely impacted were those in Gilboa. And so this is 1905, this was their plan. But this was what they did. They moved the reservoir farther north. So if the type was a little bit larger, I'm sorry, you would be able to see that. And I discovered the pointer doesn't work on this screen, so I can't exactly point to it, but you can see now that the reservoir that had been scheduled for Prattsville is now moved to Gilboa. This map was taken, was circulated on December 21st in 1915. So the people of Gilboa knew, those who were in the loop, and I can assure you they were certainly very much in the loop. They learned at the end of 1915 that Gilboa had been selected for the reservoir, and that the target had now moved to them. So this is kind of the backdrop here. This is like a decade in between the two maps, and then another decade takes place that leads us to this footage that we have. Notices about these developments, I guess we would call them these developments in the water supply system, they were regularly being written up in all the papers, the local papers as well as the city papers naturally. And that's what led to and came to the attention of our news crews. So now we're going to talk a little bit about this development of news. There was, until these silent newsreels came along, the only thing people had for their news was their newspaper. And we loved these newspapers, but they didn't have as many outlets for communication. No radios yet, obviously no TV, and no phones, by and large, in your home. I mean, you really, you were over the back fence for sure. But along came a late addition to the newsreel circuit, the silent newsreels. Now we're talking about silent because we didn't have sound in projections until 1926, 1927. So Fox News comes along in 1919. And they were, as I say, they were late entry into it. There were several others that were out and about. But Fox very rapidly expanded their operation to include, they had over 1,000 cameramen around the world sending them reels of footage for prospective stories to be formed. They would release a couple of reels every week, and those reels would contain 4 to 6 different stories. And the theaters around the country would rent them to go along with their motion picture, their feature films that they were showing that evening. And it was fairly lucrative for them, but every week Fox would receive over 60,000 feet from these cameramen all over the place, and that from that they would be selecting the footage that they would use for these 4 to 6 clips in each of their release. And they released 2 of these reels a week, so you would be constantly renting them if you had a theater to show them, because this was timely news. This isn't what some of the newspaper people call evergreen stories, or that they can run them at any time. These stories had to be turning over and run right away. So Fox is out there, and Fox is in the business, and there is news footage that has been created. The question is, how did we hear about it, and how does Gilboa enter the picture here? I think it's been now, I don't know, Ellen, Kristen, you all may remember when we got a notice from Jerry that we had received an email from a fellow in North Carolina who told us that go to this website and you'll find 6 minutes of footage about the Gilboa village, the old village, and the construction of the Gilboa Dam. And it was kind of unbelievable. I mean, first of all, it was moving images. Nobody had any moving images. There were lots and lots of stills. Everybody has seen still footage of the construction of this dam, but there weren't nobody had taken any moving images, and I don't think it's even remotely possible that there could have been any of the construction of the Ashokan, because that pretty much was winding up by 1915. So that was a little too early for some of these American companies, these newsreel companies. But we were, okay, so we go, Jerry sends us link around, we're all just beside ourselves with, disbelief. Could this really be? We're going to be looking at Gilboa Village and people moving, people actually there. And this whole, construction, that would be extremely exciting. So we went to the site and we found, just as we were promised, we found that there was a clip, 6 minutes of footage exactly as described, of some scenes from the village and the construction of the dam. Next to the information sheet that was on the site, next to where you clicked for to watch the video, was some information, the name Painter, that the cameraman's last name was Painter. So the search began. Okay, now we had to find out who was Painter. And they had been developed by these archives, the archives at the University of South Carolina's Moving Image Archive Collection. They were the ones responsible for putting this footage up. They had created this cameraman authority file. So we went to this authority file and we found, where you see that blue marker, it says John Painter, but he went by the name of Jack Painter. So now we knew the name of our cameraman, and he was the fellow that was there taking that footage, and we knew the date that he was there. We knew he was there in 1925. And we were like, okay, this is getting interesting. Let's find out a little bit more about Jack. And there he is. Jack Pinter with his famous pancake camera. And his pancake camera was developed by a fellow named Carl Ackley. And I don't know if anyone here recognizes that name. I did not recognize that name when I saw it, but it turns out Mr. Ackley was a very, very phenomenal fellow. He invented this camera. He was really considered today the father of taxidermy. And he got into cameras because he would go to Africa and he would film hunts. And then, of course, he got in. He was a sculptor. He was everything. He did some of the dioramas at the Natural History Museum in the city and natural history museums all over the world. He was incredible. Well, anyway, Carl developed this pancake camera because he needed it when he was out running after the lions and wrestling leopards and all the things that he did. And he needed a lightweight camera. He needed one that was very easy to focus. It worked well in low light, this kind of thing. So he came up with this pancake camera, and it was perfect for Jack because Jack was a daredevil. He was this guy. He was known as the fellow that would be, it just sounds like the Tom Cruise movie, right, hanging on the plane, on the wing, and Jack did do things like that. And this is background to the newsreel because you're going to see some camera shots that are kind of amazing. And the reason they're amazing is because this fellow took most of them, and he would do anything. His reputation was he would do anything for a good shot. Well, you could see with all this footage coming into the Fox lab every week, 60,000 feet you were hoping that your submission was going to be selected. So you would do just about everything you could do to find good stories and to shoot these stories in a way that was very, very exciting because, again, we're in the silent era and there's not going to be anybody telling you what's what. This is something, then we established a communication with the people at the archives in North Carolina. And the production manager there was a fellow named Benjamin Singleton. And Benjamin was a key to us finding out a lot of what we needed to know. We were about ready to drive down there to South Carolina and look at that stuff for ourselves, but Benjamin provided really the information that we needed. He found that in the metal case that Jack had submitted his newsreel footage in, this is his dope sheet, it's called, and all of the cameramen were supposed to fill this out when they sent their footage in. And he details the 10 scenes that he shot. Over to the right here, it's a long shot of this, a close-up shot of the people cutting the stones, etc., etc. And he details this. This all turned out to be extremely important to us because we were trying to figure out if we had all of the footage. This footage was called outtakes, and usually an outtake is something that's on the cutting room floor, right? I mean, it's not something, you think, okay, if this is the outtake, where's the rest of it? Where's this good stuff, the good stuff they decided to use? Well, we were able to compare the scene description that Jack had included on his dope sheet with the scenes that we had in the footage, and we could determine that in fact we had a representation of all of those scenes in the footage that we were going to be working with. And that was pretty important. There are other things that Jack included on here that are really important. He tells us he was always shooting in poor light. And, that prepares us for, okay, well, that probably wasn't a good thing to put on your dope sheet if you want people to, here he is competing to get his you know, his hundreds of feet included in the next newsreel. I don't know if saying it was shot in low light was too helpful there, but he included that. He was quite young. This was at the beginning of his career. Jack was about in his maybe mid-20s right now, and he's got a degree from Columbia in cinematography. And when you think about somebody having a degree in cinematography at that point in time, it's pretty remarkable. And so he was devoted to his craft. Down there, if you can see where it says read carefully, down in that paragraph is some instruction to these camera people to be sure and include any additional materials that you may have that would kind of help them understand your footage. And one of the things which Jack included with his footage was this article that came out in August, on August 8th, right before he went down to Gilboa a month later. This was included in his footage. So he read this article. This is from the Daily Mirror. The Daily Mirror was about a year old when Jack, so this was a new broadside publication in the city. People were grabbing it, following it, and sure enough, here's the article goes on for a while, and it talks not only about the fossils that were found during the construction of the reservoir, but it also refers, of course, to the loss of the village. So it appears from our vantage point that Jack saw this article in August and then made his decision about he's going to go there and take some footage. He's going to make a trip up to Gilboa, and this was probably the motivation for his coming, was to follow up on this particular story. So we have a lot of information about Jack's footage, 6 minutes of what we had, and so I was a little curious about what happened to Jack after things went along. All his information was entered. Fox kept all this footage. They have this collection in South Carolina has 3 million feet of footage. And they have, then when newsreels went to sound, they also have a collection of the movie tone Fox newsreels, and they have another 8 million feet of that. So this is how organized they were at Fox. When Jack's footage came in, you see how they retyped there on the left his scenes, and they created another kind of record. This card became really important to us as we were working with this footage because it's on this card where typically a note would be made if the footage had been used in a newsreel. We were trying to determine if there was a real silent newsreel out there. Was there just this footage that we were looking at, or somewhere had they made out of the footage a newsreel that we should still be looking for? So we continued to look for the real newsreel while we worked with the footage that we had. So this is the library card, and now we see, here's Jack again next to somebody some of you may recognize as Clark Gable. And this is how Jack's career took off. He was called to this site here. This is a publicity stunt, really. And this is the 1938 movie that Clark Gable did with Myrna Loy called Too Hot to Handle. And in this movie, Clark Gable plays an intrepid daredevil newsreel cameraman. So what the producers of the film decided to do for a publicity stunt was to get the real stunt guy and get him to stand there and endorse the portrait of the news daredevil that Clark Gable was doing. So that's kind of where we went with Jack's footage, that 6 minutes of it. Then we got greedy, and we thought if we have all this footage, maybe there's more. Maybe there's more. Maybe there's more. They have all this footage there. If Fox came, maybe some of the other newsreel people came, or maybe some other cameramen from Fox came. After all, they were building the dam between. They executed the contract for sale for the non-construction company to come in and build it. They signed on that contract in June of 1919. It wasn't finished until really kind of into 1926. That's a lot of years. Maybe there were some other cameramen that went up there. Maybe there was more footage to be found. So Benjamin sent the list of the inventory of the subject categories of all of the rest of the footage that they had. So we started going through looking at all these categories. And let's look at the categories that might make some sense, like masonry or dams or, easy things like that. And what we did was we ended up finding 6 more scenes. We had 3 clips, long ones from Jack, but then we found these additional ones. And these aren't exactly, they certainly aren't, this is earlier footage. This is, now we're going back 2 years to 1923. But now we have Al Brick. We have 3 of these sheets from him, and if you could read that, and perhaps some of you can, you would see that these are references to the Ashokan Dam. They were misfiled. We would have found them right away when we were looking for Gilboa-related materials, but they were filed under the Ashokan Dam because Al Brick was on his way around upstate New York. He preparing to do a story on water management and water collection, like what the reservoirs. So he'd been to Kensico, he'd been to Niagara, he'd been to a lot of places. And of course he went to the Ashokan, and he ended up at Gilboa, and he was there when they found one of the fossils, and he took some footage of that. He took some footage of them working with the dam. And he was there earlier, so we were very interested to compare the footage from 1923 to the footage from 1925. And obviously you're going to see the dam in different stages of completion. So that was Al submitting his 3 sheets there. And then we go back to our cameraman authority file, and sure enough, there he is, Albert Brick, one of their regular staff cameramen. So Al has now provided us with additional footage to work with. And there he is. Al was a member of the Navy Reserves, and he was an employee of Fox, and he was a very, very celebrated cameraman. In fact, and here's his camera. He used a different camera from Jack. He liked this debris camera made in France, and a lot of them did. Apparently this was a favorite of Fox cameraman. And what Al did was, Al in his assignments, he shot the only footage of the bombing of Pearl Harbor, Al Brick. And it's pretty phenomenal. They immediately confiscated it, the government confiscated it, and held it for about, at least a year before. So he never really got the kind of acclaim. Today you take your phone out and shoot something and send it to the news and you're a celebrity, right? I mean, isn't that the way that goes? Well, Al shot the only footage of the bombing of Pearl Harbor, and he didn't quite get his acclaim, at least certainly for quite a while. But he eventually did. Now we have Al's footage we have, this is how they were stored in these canisters, and the archives in South Carolina have tens of thousands of these, filled with these reels that they are remastering and they're cataloging and making available. The newsreel tradition, the silent and sound newsreel tradition, is viewed as one of the single most historically significant documents of our time. And it's because of archives like all of our archives, but certainly the ones right now that are working in South Carolina. So we've got the decision here. We've got, there's another picture of the camera, and we decide that based on conversations with Benjamin and all the other information that we gathered, that there is, that the chances that there is a real silent film out there, newsreel, that was made from this footage, the Gilboa Fox newsreel, probably doesn't exist. There's no evidence of it from the examination. We had Benjamin go and pull the reel out of the case and look at the tape and the film strip and look for any cut marks. They also looked for camera stops. They also looked at those library cards I showed you to see they didn't make any notes that this footage was pulled and used for, let's say, some kind of documentary. They pulled a clip out of it. They would make a note on those cards. So by a process of best guess, the best guess now is that Jack and Al's footage never made it into a Fox newsreel, and the story of Gilboa did not make it around the world the way that I had originally thought it would. So we are now with a dilemma. We have this great footage. What are we going to do with it? So we decided, since Fox didn't make a silent newsreel, we would. The first call went to someone to handle the video, and that was Brett Berry. And Brett Berry is an audio-visual fellow. He does a podcast regularly, Cat's Cast, and Brett is very skilled with both audio and visual, so I contacted Brett about, we're going to need some help. We have to put all this footage in order, and then we have to make it look like an old silent newsreel, and we had to study the style of them and so forth. And then Brett knew a fellow who was a musician, Tony Corretto was a friend of his, and he called Tony about his composer, if he would compose some music, because that's sort of the in-joke about silent films, is that they're really not silent. They had accompaniment. There was, in large theaters, there was an orchestra, but in smaller theaters, there was always a piano or an organ, actually. Although in Gilboa, we also had a woman who, she played the piano, she played the piano with the movies in the movie house in Gilboa, but she also whistled. And she was really apparently a terrific whistler, and she would accompany the movies with these whistles. And that would be Frances Christman. This is the exhibit we have up, and we had always envisioned that this newsreel would play on a kiosk, which is how it is playing now in Gilboa. And let me go back for just a second and tell you and show you the care that Tony took with the music. You'll see the care that Brett took with some of the imagery when you see the newsreel in just a second. But this is the kind of care that he took with the sound. He broke it all down into the time units in those left two columns. And then in the center there, he talked about, what is kind of a description of the scene. And then over here, he had put in some theme music that, what did he think would be some ideas for the music that he would use. And this is quite similar to what they did in the old with the productions and the feature films that were done. There were books of music Now you had talented people who could just watch something and make up some music to go along with it, but you had other people who weren't quite as improvisational or quite as good in the compositional area, and they would get these books, music books, and music books would be broken up into kinds of scenes, like chasing a railroad car. And then there would be all these suggested musical numbers to do. And then in it, you would open your book to those, and then you'd put a tab on there. And then when the movie got to that scene, you would flip to that and you'd play that clip. Well, Tony mapped out his plans for the newsreel like this, and he gave us a very, very wonderful score. So now we're going to hear, what you'll first hear is a little introduction. Since we were putting this in the museum, and we're kind of dedicated to the idea of making it as informative and as clear to people who come to the museum, you'll see a very short little introduction, and then that will be followed by the newsroom.
In 1923, Jack Painter of Fox News packed up his famous pancake camera and headed to Gilboa Village in upstate New York. His assignment editor sent him to Gilboa to shoot a newsreel of the construction of the Schoharie Reservoir and the Gilboa Dam, the latest ambitious link in the water supply system for New York City. Jack's trip came after an earlier filming in 1923 by Al Brick, another Fox cameraman, later remembered for capturing the only moving images of the attack on Pearl Harbor. Al had been driving around filming reservoirs and water treatments before ending up in Gilboa, where he captured dramatic footage of the dam construction. And during that trip, Al was also on the scene for a surprise discovery of one of the ancient Gilboa tree fossils at the Riverside Quarry near the village. Jack Painter's later visit in 1925 added more construction footage of a nearly completed dam and some final scenes of the village. As a result of Jack and Al's trips for the newsreel, today we have the only known moving images of Gilboa Village and the reservoir construction. These moving images bring them back to life for us more than a century later. News footage like this was edited into short 5 to 10 minute newsreel programs and released with Fox feature films to movie theaters internationally. Fox Film began producing these popular newsreels in 1919 to show moviegoers what was happening around the world. And like the movies they previewed, were silent films. Sound technology, or talkies, didn't appear until 1927. This newsreel allows us to watch a few of the hundreds of construction workers cutting, hauling, and laying blocks of stone for the massive dam, embankments, and spillway channel. We also get a poignant look at a nearly deserted Gilboa village prior to its destruction. The once bustling modern village, a business center in the county, would soon be burned, completely cleared, and submerged, leaving only the memories of community life, homes, businesses, farms, and beautiful landscapes. When completed, the Schoharie Reservoir project built a dam literally through the heart of Gilboa Village, and in a celebrated engineering achievement, turned the north-flowing Schoharie Creek around to flow south, above and below the ground over 18 miles, connecting to the Ashokan Reservoir through the longest continuous tunnel in the world. The Catskill Aqueduct began delivering hundreds of millions of gallons of water a day to New York City. Due to a huge fire in the Fox Film Storage Building in New Jersey, we do not have the final version of the Gilboa Fox newsreel, nor do we know for certain that one was made or released, but we do have the outtake footage, and from this footage, we have created a newsreel much like the one we imagined was shown in movie theaters around the world. Some photoplay theaters in this silent era used pianos and organs as accompaniment, and we've done the same here. So we hope you enjoy this recreated silent newsreel and its rare footage of old Gilboa Village the discovery of a Devonian tree fossil, and the construction of the Schoharie Reservoir.
Thank you very much. You enjoyed it. We cheated on this. They never would have released a newsreel this long. The newsreels were typically just maybe a minute, 2 minutes, so we cheated quite. We couldn't let go of any of those scenes, and in fact, it was longer. It was cutting to the last minute, but I wanted to point out the kind of that factor because I think it gives a little different impression of what those newsreels were like. They were much shorter, and so we were a little bit indulgent here. But at any rate, I thought we might take a few minutes to talk about Gilboa in 1925, the people, the property, what was happening there. And I think now that we've shared these images, we've all seen them together, it's pretty clear that it would have been pretty miserable to have been anywhere near Gilboa Village during that construction, particularly by the time you get into it. The 23 and 25 years were well into the construction. The dust, the dynamite, the chaos around you would have been intense. And the fundamental thing here is that by the time this footage was shot, there were virtually no real Gilboa people left in the village. The people that were in the village were workers on the dam and their families. And the Bureau of Water Supply kept a census, and the New York State took a census in June of 1925. And when you look carefully at that census, what you find is 595 people who, 203 of them from 26 different countries. And you find that there's just, according to one Gilboa resident, he was the only guy left in 1925. And that fellow was Van Palmer. And he was he had taken over Davison Palmer's dry goods store, and he was continuing to run it. His wife was quite ill. In fact, his wife died before Val left, and so he was interviewed right after Jack left, really, and the dates, if you kind of lay them out. And it's quite likely that these newsreel people may have been interested in talking to someone who was really a Gilboa person, a village person. I'm talking about somebody who lived in any of the main street or any of the structures that were going to be lost. Those were now, they had all been, the city took title in 1917 in June and basically said to people, we own this property now, and if you want to stay in your house, you can. We're going to settle with you for some amount that you probably will be shocked and enraged to hear. And then if you want to continue to stay here, you would have to rent the property, basically, from the city. And so that didn't last long. That lasted about as long as it took people to find another place to live. And the city kept track of where people were going, and we know where people moved as they left. Actually, Van Palmer was on his way to Kingston after he was closing up there and near the very end, which the final evacuation date was in October, the end of October of 1925. So we were really, when we're looking at this footage, we're looking at the very, very last days of that village. And even the people who were working there realized, I mean, many of them were out and about looking for someplace else to live because they were the ones living in all of the properties in the village. It's important, I think, to understand that the other people in Gilboa, in the town of Gilboa, there were another 600 people in the town of Gilboa that were obviously still in Gilboa. They were about to lose their town center and their business center, and it was a horrific time for everyone. But many of them still had portions of their lives together. Many of them did, of the 600 that were there. But the people were really, a few decided they were going to move to the new settlement. And the new settlement was called New Gilboa. And about the time of that second map in 1915, Eimer Wyckoff began some very early plans. He could see the writing on the wall. He knew that Gilboa was not, that this wasn't, you couldn't deny that this was going to happen. I mean, things were just all falling into place. And so Eimer bought some property. He bought 74 acres from Ward Mackey, and he began mapping out a new Gilboa. And it's where our town hall and our post office are now situated, right there on 990. That's where all that property was. That's where the buildings were that he had up. And by the time that Jack was there shooting, I wish he'd gone over and shot New Gilboa. And it really bugs me he didn't do that, because that was the hopeful, I mean, as much, we were really scraping here, but I mean, that was the hopeful side of what was going on, was that people that could rebuild, there could be a new Kingston, or there could be and there was going to be a new Gilboa. They had officially named the new cemetery the New Gilboa Cemetery. There was a new Gilboa election district, the polling site that was taking place on that property in New Gilboa. So there was something to be really looked for and hoped for there. And 2 days after Jack was there shooting, Eimer Wyckoff dies. And it was like the most, really, he was a visionary. He was a fellow that was going to make this happen. And he dies suddenly after having lunch. He was in Grand Gorge. He was with people and friends, and then he became ill, and he had passed away by the next day. So all of a sudden, New Gilboa, you know, the air was out of the tires, and they foraged on. I mean, they went on. The Lewis family and the Van Loon family and many others, the Hess family and the Bakers, and we could list the regulars, the Bats, we could list a number of families that tried very, very hard to make that work. But it just was a bit much, because Eimer had bought the property, rented out a lot of those big parcels, and so in the settlement of his estate, a lot of all of that had to be rearranged and sorted, and it was very complicated, and people at that point could hardly deal with what was happening, so that was a really, really serious setback. So that happened in 1925, and then that was followed by a fire that took place in downtown Lower Gilboa Village. It was a fire that the Stanford fire chief, the Stanford Fire Department came over and put it out, said had been caused by some rubbish that was behind the Slover department. Well, it wasn't a department store, it was a grocery store. And the Slovers had moved over to Gilboa Village from Fleischmann's to run this store to keep the people that were living there. Obviously needed a barber, they needed groceries, they needed all of these things. So some of these businesses kept going, but they were run by other people. But anyway, the Slovers were running that grocery, and the fire caught in the back, and that took out a whole portion of the lower part of downtown Gilboa. And what is relevant for us here tonight is that a rumor that started in the papers immediately, was spread throughout the papers, that this was possibly connected to a story that a major motion picture company was going to be paid to come in and shoot the burning of the village, because they would have had to have burned the structures and then cleared them away in order to prepare the land for the bottom of the reservoir. Okay, so I think what is important for us today, there is no records that anyone has found to date to establish that there had ever been a contract of any sort. In fact, it would have been very unusual, in fact, I've never heard of, for certainly any of the newsreel people to have been paying for any extravaganza that was going on, such as a burning house or a burning anything. But I think that the fact that these newsmen had been on the scene literally a month before this occurred, that there is good reason to think that that is part of the substance. It's true there was a major motion picture company right there at the scene. They weren't there a month later when the fire took place. They weren't connected in any way to that. They did not come back when, in fact, the village was burned, that we know of, but probably pretty unlikely revisit there. And so, but I think it's important to see that when we found this footage, all of a sudden something clicked, that could actually help us understand that that rumor did have some real shape and form to it, and it was probably the Fox film company and these cameramen. Everybody would have been talking about it, that would have provided some of the basis for that story. So I think that's part of that other rumor is that people had burned their own homes, that this was, I see some of you nodding, you've heard that. And considering they weren't there, it's a little difficult to quite imagine how that happened. And the fact that this fire took place in the evening at 10:15 at night would suggest that even if you were so inclined, and even if you had been in the area, it seems to me unlikely you would have been burning a home that another group of people were living in. I mean, that's a whole other kind of gesture. But I was talking with Patsy earlier a little bit about this. I think the story is a powerful one, because what it does is it shows us just how it was the story itself tells us about how the people of Gilboa fought back. They fought back a great deal against this whole reservoir. There were petitions, there were legal actions, there was all kinds of stuff that they did. But that particular gesture is a little bit of a stretch, but it certainly catches the spirit of the people of the village there. Yeah.
I came up here in 2006 as a pastor of the Gilboa Church, and I was met with conversations, many of them, a lot of people still were suppressing the anger, and the way they talked to me about it was like it happened the day before. It was that crystal clear in their mind to see the land taken, and from that, unfortunately, came a hatred for the city. And that is very difficult to overcome. Realize that we're several generations past that now. But at the time, it was very, very evident. And I came from down there, so my reception was rather timid. But I vowed to overcome it, which I did. But I felt every bit of the anguish of the families. And one of the stories was that people who had moved out of their house went back and burned the house down rather than have it filled with water. That type of thing. And the church was moved. Yeah, the church was moved.
Yes.
Yep. There's the church now at the top of the hill Part of that was the old church from the old village.
Perhaps.
Little bits, not the whole thing.
Yeah.
Although there is a video of them pulling the church up on logs to its current location.
Yes, yes.
I think you
Yes.
guys don't you have a copy of it?
Yes, I do.
Good.
Yes, yes,
And it's fascinating to see
yes.
how, but it never became the community that it was as shown at that time.
Right, right.
So we celebrate that we still exist.
That's right. That church that was moved after the 1996 flood was a church that had been rebuilt. It was rebuilt in 1926 at the Cornerstone and was moved up to the hill. And they had to rebuild it because that church, that Methodist church, was one of the buildings that was lost in the fire in October in 1925. So, I mean, it's, and a lot of the stories that you read about how people would preserve parts of the benches from the church would be moved from here to there. And, people wanted to, of course, to hold on to absolutely any piece of Gilboa that they could. I think we have, Kristen, some molding, right, in the archives there from one of the homes, and we, it's like if you just, I go into some of the museums around here and they have whole displays of all these objects from, and I'm thinking, wow, we don't have, we don't have a lot of as much as we would like, certainly, of pieces of Gilboa.
What happened to the pictures that were in Clark's restaurant?
I do not. I don't. Does anyone know what happened to the pictures in Clark's restaurant?
Did they go to the schools, Cindy? Oh, I don't know. Clark's pictures right as you walk in the entranceway?
I think they were.
I think
I think they had them all copied.
that folder that's in the entrance to the elementary room. I think that's those
A lot of them might be still there. So we have to maybe use them and use them to show the restaurant.
Would be fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, Lee,
Yeah.
who burnt the rest of the buildings?
I'm sorry.
Who-
The city was going to. The city was definitely. Yes, oh,
They
definitely.
needed to be burned, and the city
Yes.
did.
Yes, they did. Yes. They absolutely did. Yes.
I was just curious to know, what an excellent presentation. Have you been able to investigate some of the newspapers, the local newspapers at the time?
Yes.
And what more could you add to the story from that?
We have investigated them, and what more could we add to what?
To the story, I mean, what?
The story of the loss of Gilboa?
Yes, like what the people were saying, or?
The newspapers of the time are, frankly, the lifeblood of the history of the town and village of Gilboa. So for Gilboa, for sure. Because Gilboa had a huge fire in 1890 and lost all of their town records, which was, catastrophic, really, because all the settlement information and all of those early deeds and so on, all of that. But after 1890, coming forward, you have, the ability to go back and check these actual records. So what do you have before? Well, the newspaper came to Gilboa in 1878, and the editor was kind of lured to Gilboa from one of the townspeople, because it was such a big deal to have a newspaper. And so the newspaper stayed in Gilboa until 1918, in October. We almost had it through 18. And how I wish that George and his family, George Fuller and his family, had stayed, longer in Gilboa, because that was the only real good coverage you were getting. There was some good coverage. You can go read the Stanford papers, you can read the Jefferson papers, you can pick up Catskill Mountain, you can pick up some information around and around, but it wasn't like quite at all the same as reading it in the Gilboa Monitor. But as I say, George and his family left. They left early. The writing was on the wall, and they couldn't stand being there. And he wanted to get his kids in school, so they were in Oneonta. They left for Oneonta. But we really miss that. And actually, we're going to have a program that we're co-sponsoring with Jefferson and the Middletown Historical Society about reading historical newspapers online, and a lot of them online, and you'll be hearing about this program next month. We have the fellow who runs one of those newspaper online things coming to talk about how easy it is to use it, and you can literally just like kind of read the paper online now. Millions of pages of New York newspapers are online. Yeah.
I'm a retired lineman from New York State Electric and Gas. I was stationed in Stamford. When I moved up here from the Binghamton area in 1978, there was a power line that went alongside the Delaware, or the Ulster and Delaware Railroad tracks, the old tracks. And I worked on that line. Okay, but now that's all gone, right? And the power that was shipped from to Stamford was generated in Gilboa.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, that was John Grant's Tri-County Electric and Power Company.
Yeah.
And that was, I mean, he was a judge. He was a Sanford guy,
Yeah.
Grant. But the power company, you see pictures of the creek, later pictures of the creek, you see that power plant down there. And, again, there were so many, frustrating things about why that attracted to the city to come to Gilboa. They had some power right there.
Yeah.
They had other things just happened to be their quarry that just happened to be right at hand. There were just too many things that were, made it a little bit easier. But yeah,
It was
that was very important.
2,400 volts, and 2,400 volts is, and they would shut they shut the generators off at a certain time at night, and then start them up the next morning so the farmers could get out to start milking. Right. And I mean, I love history, and so I'm a little part of it. But anyway, it's like, and if you go to Grand Gorge and you're going up the mountain, if you look at that power line that goes up over the mountain to Grand Gorge, that's the original layout. That was the original right of way, and when they had it.
Wow.
That's what I said. I worked on that alongside the railroad tracks. I mean, I helped take it down. It was all number 6 copper wire. It's just smaller than my finger, my pinky finger, And I helped take that all down.
Well, thank you very much for
So-
I will never look at it the same again. Thank you so much. Yeah. Oh, hi, Ellen.
New York City took photographs of every building, every home and every outbuilding, and we have those pictures. They did it so that they could use the photographs when they calculated how little money was going to be given to homeowners. But we have a file of everyone, every building that is visited.
Isn't that the day that the story goes, DTP was working in the dump?
Yes.
And somebody happened to be there, he said, what are you doing? He said, well, we're just cleaning out our offices. And he looked and there was all these houses. And it was the town. That's how it was about their schools.
This little body, yes.
And I was at a garage sale up in Broome Center, Daily Store, where Vic and Bonnie Mace lived. And there was a yard sale, and I saw this little box. It had compartments in it, little wooden box. Kind of like that, it was $5, $5. So I bought it, and I'm looking at it, and I turned it over. It's Davis and Palmer hardware.
And Dottie, we just got, just like this came to us, this guy wrote us that email and we found this footage. these two people came, the Davis family, and brought us a quilt that we have up in the museum now with 276 names of residents of Gilboa on it. And that Davis we thought was totally not related to those other Davis, the Davis of the Davis of Homer, but they are. But they are. We have finally managed to find I don't even know how many removed they are, but they are there. And we tracked them, actually, their connection, solidified their connection through the daily paper, through the weekly paper, pardon me, the daily paper, with a little insert in that paper referring to one of these Davises visiting those Davises in Oneonta. Terrific. Thank you all very much.
Feel free to grab a piece of cake and a drink if you're interested in staying for a moment.